Welcome to the Propreneur Podcast, where we help practice owners become better entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Dino Watt. And welcome once again, everybody, to the Best Practices Podcast. I'm excited for our guest today because I have such a personal connection with her style of medicine and what she does in her practice. Between my wife and I, we are huge believers in this. Today, my guest is Dr. Karima Hirani out of Culver City, California, and she is going to teach us and share with us some of the best practices that she has come up with in her business. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you got into all of this? Because you have a couple, you have a long journey that has led us to here, and I'd love to hear it.
Okay, so I am board certified in family medicine, and I finished residency in 1996. Before medical school, though, I went to UCLA and I got a master's in nutrition from the School of Public Health. So nutrition was always sort of kind of in the background. And somehow I kind of, as fate would have it, I ended up practicing integrative medicine by as early as 1999. So it was a very short stint that I had in the realm of conventional medicine. And I think I was probably always drawn to integrative medicine. And then shortly after that, about 2 years later, I started my own practice with the help of my husband, who has an MBA and also a master's in computer science. And so here I am almost 20 years later, very, very happy with the kind of practice that I have and able to help a lot of patients thinking outside of the box.
And that's the most important thing right there, is thinking outside the box. You know, I think what we need to do is we need to back up just for a moment, because we do have doctors and practitioners from all over the place, from chiropractors, orthodontists, dentists. I don't know if everybody quite understands what you mean by integrative medicine. Can you help them out with that?
Absolutely. So integrative medicine is where a physician is practicing conventional medicine, but is incorporating methods that may not necessarily be the standard of care, but there is some evidence behind it, and so doctors are able to utilize some of these practices. So examples of that would be acupuncture. Homeopathy would be another example of that. So I integrate homeopathy in my practice. Of course, I integrate nutrition in my practice, and I do testing as well. And then I also use a lot of ozone in my practice. And I do the Ozone, like your wife had, but I do many other things with ozone. For example, I do cosmetic ozone with it. I do IV ozone. I do ear ozone. So we have a stethoscope, for people that are having ear infections or dizziness. And we do intranasal ozone for sinus infections. So these are some of the things that I do in my practice.
Let's talk about some of the benefits that come from, and it sounds silly, but I think there are people out there who just are maybe stuck or maybe just not as educated. Let's talk about some of the benefits of thinking outside the box and using your knowledge of traditional medicine and blending it together with maybe some non-traditional medicines, but that have great effectiveness. How has that kind of, I guess my question would be, why do you feel that people should be introduced to this newer form of medicine than what they're used to? And how is it beneficial to them?
I think what the type of patient that finds this type of medicine very effective is the type of patient that hasn't received answers for their ailments. So functional medicine, integrative medicine doctors, they tend to specialize in helping patients with chronic illness or the mystery illnesses that they haven't, the patients haven't been able to find answers for, or that conventional medicine doesn't have answers for. So that's when they seek out doctors like myself. So we do tend to see, ill patients, chronically ill patients, and and I have good results because of the way I do a workup on them as far as looking for the underlying cause, and then offering them, various different modalities for relief. I also do a pain management technique called neural therapy. It's a type of a trigger point injection practice, and I get phenomenal results with that. With a lot of my chronic pain patients.
One of the things that I talk about a lot with practice owners is the evolution of a practice, right? And how I believe over the last 10, 15 years, there have been evolutions that have happened quicker than they did maybe the previous 20 years. I'm going to guess, you said 1996 is when you graduated?
From residency, yeah.
From residency.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that for just a moment. Like the quick, rapid shift that's happened really as an evolution inside of your practice and inside of functional versus integrative medicine.
Oh my God, it's been phenomenal. When I first started practicing this way, my conventional colleagues, they were not open to learning about anything that I did. And, they thought of doctors like myself as quacks. And today, they're coming and asking me questions, and they're very intrigued because their patients are asking them and they don't really have answers. So there's been a real shift, and I think there's been an acceptance of the way we practice, especially in California.
All right, you've got to have at least one really good story around that.
A good story. Oh my gosh! Now you put me
well,
on
with I just on the spot. I know I didn't prepare you ahead of time for this, but I just can see as you're talking about that, I can see where.
I'll tell you. I have one story.
Yeah.
So
all right.
A colleague of mine, I refer, and this is typical. I refer to the specialists more than they refer to me because they're still a little sort of, not really clear on exactly what I do, but nonetheless, she's very respectful of me, and I'm a source of referrals too. So I had sent her a patient. She's a gynecologist. I had sent her a patient to handle some of her gyne stuff, and it turns out that she was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and so she came back to me and told me that she's now been diagnosed with Hashimoto's and she'd like my help with it. Well, I just did like one neural therapy injection to her thyroid gland, which is neural therapy is like acupuncture using novocaine. And sometimes just that one injection can, literally turn off the Hashimoto's, and it's exactly what happened for her. So as soon as I saw the lab work, I was very happy to inform her that, hey, guess what? This patient no longer has Hashimoto's, and she was just very happy for me, but she wasn't, she didn't really want to learn what I do, but she was just kind of happy that I was able to, turn the Hashimoto's off. So that's
it's a great, that's great, right? Because I think the most important thing is you were able to help the patient. And that's, I know what is you wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't in your heart, if that's not the main focus, right? Whatever the functionality is, especially because you are referring over to, right, like medicine, MDs, right? Like, it's not like you're saying, no, mine's the only way. It's like we can work together and integrate, the two different formats. So here's my question, which I think maybe some people would have. I think back in the day, probably 10, 15 years ago, when people would hear a story like that, oh, my friend, she had Hashimoto's disease, and then she went to Dr. Karima, and Dr. Karima was able to do the injections, and it stopped. She doesn't have that anymore. You hear like, oh, okay, my friend or this person that I heard of once, or it's usually like a telephone game type like conversation. But we're hearing about it more and more on the regular now, right? It's not like it's just some odd, weird one time my friend. It's not a third, fourth, fifth person removed. It's happening to people we know. So I still feel, though, that there's maybe a slowness in the drive up for an MD at a normal hospital to get on board with it. What do you think that is that's stopping them?
The way we were trained as physicians, it's all about the scientific method, and evidence-based medicine is the way we've been taught and the way we've been trained. Even though there's so many practices, out there that date back, thousands of years, and they've been found to be successful, and there may not necessarily be that scientific method to prove that they work. For example, acupuncture, but it's acupuncture and Chinese medicine has been around way longer than modern medicine, and Ayurvedic medicine, which comes from India, is even older than Chinese medicine.
Wow.
That's been around for probably about 5,000 years. So
Wow.
so
And it's
it's,
just a
it's
matter.
all about the scientific method, and you know
It's interesting because I love that you said that, there are things that we've been doing scientifically that have been proven for years, but there also was the scientific method that we have proven a lot of things don't work anymore that we once thought did, right? Whether it be bloodletting or whatever, right? We don't do that anymore. But back then it was like, no, that was the scientific method. It's been proven. So it's very interesting. Okay. So the area that I wanted to ask you about that you mentioned a couple of times was the oxygen therapy. I think this is such an interesting area. I was literally on a call earlier today with a orthodontist who was talking about one of the reasons why they have to make sure they get a dental clearance before they put the braces on is because if they put the braces on, and even if they put a brace on, there's a cavity on the surface, it will trap it from getting any oxygen, but once it's released, it could be even worse. So we started a conversation about how oxygen is really the food, if you will, to many bad diseases. So let's talk about how oxygen and oxygen therapy and Ozone and all those other things have really changed the way that you look at medicine nowadays.
Yeah, most definitely. I've been utilizing ozone in my practice since 2013. I got training from physicians here in the U.S. and then as late as 2017, 2018, I completed a year-long course through Spain, through a European organization. And then I got to go to Madrid for a week, poor me, to get further training in ozone. So I've learned a lot about ozone, and it's just this amazing tool. So ozone, for your audience, if they don't know, it's made up of 3 oxygen molecules that come together by actually an electrical spark that splits open the O2, and then 3 of the singlet oxygens come together, and now we have ozone, which is 3 oxygen atoms. And ozone has some amazing properties. For one, ozone can directly turn off the pain receptors on the cells where you're having, localized pain. And so that could have been one of the ways that it helped your wife, is because it has local actions of, just turning off the pain receptors. The other thing that ozone does that's amazing, and again, this is, just oxygen and, no side effects, is that it can basically stimulate, once it comes in contact with your cells, it will stimulate your own body to produce antioxidants. So we all have, an antioxidant system, antioxidant enzyme systems that are almost sort of lying dormant at times. And the ozone, in the right doses, seems to know how to just turn that on, turn that mechanism on. And then you have this whole cascade of antioxidants that are released. And now you have, if we're dealing with inflammation, it turns off the inflammation. If we're dealing with infection, it can kill the infection. So there's just such a wide variety of uses in ozone, and your audience should know that there's probably more than 3,000 publications on ozone. So safety and efficacy is well established. So you're talking about scientific method. When it comes to ozone, there's actually quite a bit of science and quite a bit of literature to support its use in medicine. But sadly, again, it's not very widely used or accepted. And what's amazing, and what your audience and you may not know, is that Ozone was actually used quite a bit here in the US around the turn of the 1900s. And then around 1910, for some reason, it just got banned by the American Medical Association for no good reason. And when the US bans something, then the rest of the world will ban it too.
Yeah.
But luckily, it's accepted. It's legal in about 12 countries, and there are a lot of countries that are doing wonderful research and publishing it. Russia is, Spain is, of course, Cuba is, Japan, and several other countries are doing research in ozone, and it's accepted as a useful tool in medicine.
Well, I definitely hope that it becomes more and more mainstream, if you will. And I'm not a huge fan of that word, but you get more and more people accepting it, asking for it, and utilizing it. It's funny, as you describe it, it sounds a lot like what scientists are trying to create, which is those nanobots, right? The nanotechnology. And it's like, well, isn't that what ozone's doing? Like everything you say, turning something off, turning it on, making it better. That's all we're trying to do. But again, we're trying to take out the nature side of things, right, and put the man in it. So it makes it a little bit more challenging and difficult. Well, thank you for giving us a background on you and on some of these fascinating things. I think, of course, this show is all about not just getting to know you as a doctor, but getting to know you as a practitioner and getting to know you as some of the areas that you have found in your practice that has helped you succeed and thrive. Tell us a little bit about your practice.
So I see approximately 50% of my practice is pediatric. And I see a lot of autism in my practice, and I see children with all kinds of neurodevelopmental disorders like ADHD and PANS and PANDAS, for some parents might know what that is. So I specialize in that, and I utilize a lot of techniques that I use in treating my adult chronically ill patients. So namely, it's diet, changing the diet, removing the inflammatory foods like gluten and dairy and sugar, and testing for allergies and infections, and hormonal imbalances, especially in adults, and environmental toxins like heavy metals or mold. And then with the adults, I get to do other fun things like, for example, I get to do ozone injections or the neural therapy injections. And we also have a really wonderful tool that's called the pulsed electromagnetic frequency machine, which mainly, again, the adults will go for. And this is a really wonderful tool that, again, has quite a bit of research behind it. And it's used to treat joint pain. It's been, versions of it are FDA approved for treating joint pains, and versions of it are also FDA approved for treating depression. So it's been studied in a whole variety of conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and heart disease and diabetes and hypertension. So so I do a lot of neat things in my practice.
So do you think it's the variety of what you do that's helping your practice currently grow, or is there something else that you feel is the area where you're really winning in your practice?
I think that the reason why if my practice is growing is really because I have a wonderful partner, my husband. He, like I told you, he has an MBA and a master's in computer science. He actually gave up his career to help me start my practice. And he's done amazing work with, like, you can check out my website and you'll see, but he's also done amazing work with search engine optimization. And I'm constantly getting emails from these companies that want to help with search engine. And I have several colleagues, professional colleagues, that have spent upwards of like in the $50,000 dollar range to get optimal search engine. And apparently these companies don't deliver. And I've been really fortunate to have a partner that knows how to do that. So I think that's played a big role in my success. And I'd like to say perhaps I get invited to speak at at these organizations like Autism One and things like that. Like next weekend I'll be speaking at a women's summit, Wise Paws, and they actually want me to talk about ozone and cosmetics.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to get to talk about neural therapy, which is wonderful for women, and helping them with their menopausal symptoms or their hot flashes and fatigue, and like we talked about, the thyroid. So,
Sure.
so yeah, I think I have fun, with the variety of patients that I see, and I think that also helps.
That's awesome. I have to address the idea that you actually work with your husband. So many people have that's how I actually got started in this industry. Was I was working with couples who were trying to work together and it wasn't working out so well. So I want to know, I mean, we're going to go off script here a little bit. I want to know what are some of your successes, how you guys are making it a success between the two of you in your practice, because I'm sure there's a lot of people eagerly listening right now to how you make that happen.
It hasn't always been, peaches and cream.
Sure.
Because it spills over into the marriage. So,
Mm-hmm.
you have to really, work it, and if sometimes if you need help, like, with therapy, get a good counselor. I think that the secret for us is, that it plays a big role in our relationship and our marriage. And so if we want to succeed in our marriage, then we have to make the practice work as well. And we've always sort of divided our tasks. He manages the business end of it, and I get to manage the patient end of it. And it's when we sort of try to get in each other's departments is when we run into trouble. And of course, sometimes I kind of want to tell him what to do, and he wants to tell me what to do. So that's where we kind of will run into problems. But that could happen even with an office manager that was managing my practice. So, but I think at the end of the day, the key is that we both are on the same page. He wants to see me succeed, and he's there, backing me up.
That's awesome. That's very, very good. Well, thank you for giving us a little peek into that part of your relationship, and your practice. I think that's very, very key. Are there any challenges that you're up against right now that you are seeking out a solution for?
I would say, yeah. I'm just hearing over and over again that I really need to get on social media and do more Instagram and things like that. So I think that's our challenge, and maybe also for my husband is just sort of stepping up to that platform. It just but it seems like that's something we need to do. So that's the next big step for us. And maybe for like these millennials, it's like no big deal. They have their companies and their businesses. And I've always been a very private person. And so for me to, even have a Facebook account and post, is just very, it goes against who I am. So.
Sure. Well, I think it's important, two things. One is that you make sure that you stay true to who you are, right? I think that's very key. And then two is I always like to look at how do you circumvent what must happen and create what can happen, meaning that if you need to be on social media, which, right now it's free advertising, there's free opportunity for publicity and marketing and stuff, that's great. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it, right? Like there are millennials that I'm sure you have people. How many team members do you have in your practice?
I have 4 staff members.
Okay, so here you have, I'm sure you have a couple in there or some that you can find that can take care of that for you, that can give you guys all what you like. Have them take care of it. You just let them know what you're looking for and what you want to do based upon what people have told you would be good to do. I have doctors who are the same way, clients of mine who, they're like, man, I don't want to be up on there. I got to run a business, right? It's like, yeah, totally. So don't do it. I don't run my social media. My daughter, I pay her. She's very good at doing it. She understands it. She's a millennial. She's 21 years old, right? She gets it. She understands it. I don't understand it. I don't understand why I got to have a hashtag here or a tag here or a poll here or whatever. So I just say, and so she does this. She says, hey, Dad, so I need, 30 pictures of you doing either work or out in the world or whatever, or I need, you with your teams and having fun with them. And then I just need to give me some ideas of what those are about. Or give me some, I have a book that she can steal from, right? Still things that I want to say. And then she creates it and puts it out there. And I told her, man, if my rule is basically this. It's an old, a rule that I heard from a radio show host years ago. If it's not illegal, immoral, or fattening, put it up there. It's fine, right? And so that's my rule. So you don't have to do it. Don't worry about doing it.
You're right.
Well, this is the portion of the show that I like to ask a few questions of my guest. That's kind of like a rapid fire, quick answer type situation. You ready to play?
All right, I'm ready to play.
All right. What's the number one thing that you wish they would have taught you in graduate school?
How to interview and hire the right employee.
Wow, that's a really good one. We haven't had that one yet, and that's so true. I know you're not doing that just to lead into a plug for my upcoming book, Hire and Fire Like a Boss, but I appreciate that. It is true, right? It's such a needed thing that we have to teach people.
The number of times that I've hired the wrong employee, and then it comes back to bite you. It's been a nightmare. But by the grace of God, the last few years I've got a great team of staff members that I'm hoping that are going to stay with me for a long time.
That's awesome. It's so challenging, and yet when you find the right people, it's like, where were you my whole life, right? So that's great.
Yeah.
All right, what is a book that you believe every private practice owner should read? To be honest with you, when it comes to business stuff, I don't need to. So I think that everyone should have a partner like my husband. He reads it and disseminates the information and gives it to you, huh?
Yeah.
Well, do you have any other books besides business books that you like?
Oh my gosh, I'm always like, I can show you books that I have sitting right here. Lost Connections. This is a great book written by Johan Hari. He's a social scientist, and he talks about the real causes of depression and anxiety, and how it's really not a serotonin deficiency, and Big Pharma knows that. The research has shown how placebo works just as good as these pharmaceuticals, but yet, doctors just keep prescribing them. So those are the kind of books that really excite me. This is another one, I'll tell you real quickly. It's called Hidden, and this one just, Bitten. And this one is by Chris Newby, and this one just came out recently. And she goes into, check this out, she goes into the history of how Lyme, the bug, the Lyme organism, how it was studied in the U.S. bioweapons department in the 50s, and how it wasn't virulent. It wasn't supposed to cause disease, but all of this research and how they weaponized the Lyme and how it escaped. And William Bergdorfer was interviewed in this book, and he's since passed on because he was the discoverer of the Lyme organism, but he was a big researcher, and he worked in the biodefense department in the 50s. And she asked him point blank, do you feel responsible for the current epidemic of Lyme? And he said, yes.
Wow. Yeah. I have a good friend, one of my very first clients ever, a gentleman I mentioned to you on the pre-show, of Dr. Jason West out of Pocatello, Idaho. He is huge in the Lyme world. Like, that's his main focus. I'm going to definitely recommend. I'm sure he already knows it, but I'll recommend that to him for sure. Yeah. See, those are two good books. See, it didn't have to be about business. Those are great books. Yeah. Speaking of books, in my book, The Practice RX, I focus a lot on team culture and team performance as the foundation of business growth. I truly believe that if you have those two things dialed in, you can grow your practice. What do you see as the biggest challenge that private practice owners are facing when it comes to teams and office culture?
I think the biggest challenge is not giving your employees enough autonomy. Really appreciating them, or really recognizing their talents, or tapping into their talents. And like you said, it's very important to make them feel like they're part of a team. We're all part of a team together. So it's not like just my practice and you're the employee. It's not like that. It's like we're all in this together. We're all here to help all the patients. And yeah.
I say all the time to my doctors, I learned this a few years ago, that your team members wake up every single day to make your dream come true.
Exactly.
And if you have that perspective, it changes things a bit. So I love that. Thank you for saying that. Before we get to the end, I hate it when like it shows that I listen to or podcast listeners, like at the very end, we're going to talk about this. I'd like to know now, how do people get a hold of you? Because you've got tons of information, and especially if people need any help, forget it if they're in the California area, if they're in anywhere at all, if they need to get a hold of you and get help from you, how can they get a hold of you?
It's www.drhirani, DR without a period. Hirani is spelled HIRANI.com. Dr. Hirani.
Nice. Very good. Go check her out on her website, get some information. Okay, so this is always a hard one, but what's the best advice that you've ever received in life or business?
It should never always be just about your bottom line. You need to have a passion for what it is that you're doing. And if you truly have a passion, whether it's to help patients get better, whatever it is, the money will follow.
I totally believe that to be true. What's the best resource or tool that you've used to grow your practice?
My husband.
Yeah, that's a good one. I love it. I love celebrating our spouses, and that's true, man. I know that I would not be where I am without my wife.
Awesome.
Even her just looking at my spelling is like, it saved me probably a ton of money because I'm the worst speller in the world, right? But it's so great to celebrate that. So thank you for celebrating him, and thank him for helping you in your practice as well, and helping us get all of our technical stuff to get together today too.
Yeah, you saw him helping us.
That's right. Well, Dr. Hirani, thank you so much for your time today and sharing just a few of your best practices with us. We really appreciate your expertise, who you are, what you're doing for the world. It really has been a joy.
Thank you so much, Dino. I enjoyed it too.
Great. Well, everybody, we will see you on the next episode of Best Practices Podcast. Remember, whatever you're doing, make it the best. Appreciate it. Talk to you later. Thanks so much again for listening to the Propreneur Podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do so. Also, if you feel like you might be a good fit for our podcast as a guest, or know somebody who you think would be, go ahead and email us at dino@dinowatt.com. Again, thanks for support. We'll see you on the next episode.